Okay, I think we're live. There's always like a moment where... Oh, wait. Oh, yeah, here we go. It says we have people watching. So there we go. Hello, people. Welcome to a live stream. We're going to be chatting about the Emma 2020 film. Yes, I am Katie from Books and Things. If other people want to introduce themselves, we are the Jane Austen July hosts.
Sure, I'm Marissa from Blatantly Bookish.
And I'm Claudia from Spencer's Library.
And yeah, so we watched the Emma 2020 film this afternoon together, which was very fun. So we're going to have a chat about it. I think we will be quite spoilery, I guess. So
yeah,
probably.
So if you haven't read, I'll put up a spoiler warning and keep it there for people joining later. Yeah, I think if you haven't read the book, you probably shouldn't watch. It's probably not a massive deal if you haven't seen the film, because I mean we will talk about how they interpret it, but probably matters less. But yeah, I feel like probably if you haven't read the book, you should stay away in case we start spoiling things.
I think this will be to watch later in the month. If people are currently reading Emma, they can rewatch this later.
Yeah. So yeah, what did we think of the film? We have seen it before, I think, all of us. Yeah.
Once or twice.
This was my third time watching it, I think.
It's really good. That's my overwhelming feeling after watching it. It's such a good film.
Yeah.
Still got lots to complain about, obviously, as we do. But...
Yes. Yeah, I think it's just such a pretty film. It really is. And so I enjoy watching it for that reason alone. As an Emma adaptation, it's a little hit or miss for me. I think we talked about it briefly, but I think the most important part of Emma as a book in general is, all of the characters and their relations to each other. And it did some of the characters so well, and then some of them just missed the mark for me. So as an adaptation, I both like it and dislike it at the same time. So it's not my favorite, but I do really enjoy watching it.
You said it's really pretty. I think it's visually kind of really stands out because they're trying to really go for that historical look, but also to make it unique and visually, it stands out. Like there's some really bright colors, there's some really out there fashion choices, and it just looks very stylized and very aesthetically interesting.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're definitely not shying away from making it look historical.
Yeah, I really like the look of it. I feel like it's got really good costumes and design, and like the soundtrack is really, really great. And as a film, I feel like it's just very, very well produced. Like the three kind of like standout films for me, like Austen adaptation films in terms of like production and everything, are the 2020 Emma film, the 2016 Love and Friendship film, which is a Lady Susan adaptation, which is very stylized and very cool. And I also really love the 2005 Pride and Prejudice, which I know is not everyone's favorite, but I do think it's a great film. Which is controversial.
Not Sense and Sensibility.
No, I don't really like the 90s Sense and Sensibility film. I'm not fussed. I just like, I don't know, I think it's really rushed. And because I love the 2008 like Sense and Sensibility miniseries, or 2009, whichever one it is, so much that I think I've only seen the 90s film the once, and I've never felt the need to watch it again because I love the miniseries so much. But maybe I should give it another chance. But I'm not that fussed by it. And the ages are all wrong. Like it's really important that Eleanor and Marianne are really young, in my opinion. And it's like, I don't know, I don't love that film, but that was also a controversial opinion.
That's fair. Yeah, I think that one's a standout for me as well. I mean, the Sense and Sensibility, but also the Emma film. And I'm it's a shame that we haven't seen like a really good adaptation since then. I say that it's only 5 years ago, but we did have an attempt.
Yeah, and it would be nice because I do feel like the miniseries often can capture the stories better because they have more time. But I feel like for like soundtracks and beautiful aesthetics, like often it is
the cinematography.
And Emma just like as a film looks so good. But I also think they do a decent job with the plot, considering that they only have 2 hours and it's quite a long book.
They do actually, yeah. They don't leave that much out, and you get all the main plot points in there. I think they don't cut characters, which a lot of times they do. Yeah.
I think we were saying.
that's right.
I think we were saying earlier, like Jane Fairfax, Frank Churchill stuff feels a bit rushed. Like they as characters maybe don't have as much time. But
Miss Bates too.
But they're included. Did either of you? Oh, no, actually, that might be a stupid question. I was going to say, did either of you watch it in the cinema? But no one was watching anything in the cinema in 2020.
It was February 2020. So I did. I saw it in the cinema. Yeah, that was like, I guess one of the last things I saw in the cinema. Yeah,
I remember. Like we were talking, and you were saying how you just saw it last week, and I was like, okay, I'll see it next week. And then next week, everything shut down, and I'm like, okay, I will not be seeing it for a long time, I guess.
It was good. Yeah, it was good in the cinema. But yeah, I guess that would have been one of the last things I saw. Yeah.
I bet that looks good on a big screen.
Yeah.
We've got some people commenting. You're saying my microphone's working. That's great. He was concerned about that. Also, hi to Hannah, who's also participating in Jane Austen. In Jane Austen July, I'm sure. Yeah.
And James was talking about the costumes and Emma's hair. I can't remember what Emma's hair is like in the ball. We were saying earlier,
I actually did notice that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you were saying
she has got right.
Yeah. Sorry, you go, Claudia.
At the ball, she's got, because normally she's got like the bun and then the sort of curls, like what we associate with Regency hair. At the ball, she's got the little curls all over, and I was thinking that looks a bit modern, maybe. But I think the effect was just to make her look really extra, like you could tell that some poor maid was curling those hairs and putting them in place perfectly. I think that was probably the intention there.
Yeah. Yeah, and Claudia, I think you were saying, not during this, but during the movie, that there was one hairdo that was very extra, Mrs. Elton's, at that like tea party.
Yeah, when she got that like weird bow above her head.
But you said it was actually accurate, right?
Well, I actually, because afterwards I looked that up and I did find the fashion plate. I should point out I did not do this research myself, but this is on a blog post that someone made about the costumes and hair in Emma, which I'll. Can I link that somewhere, Katie? I don't know.
Yes, I think if you put it in the comments, and I can then put it in the description on YouTube later if you send it to me.
Well, it'll be in the description. But maybe I can sort of hold it up to the camera. So this is a fashion plate, a French fashion plate. It's actually a little bit inaccurate because it's from 1830, apparently. Oh, no, this isn't going to work, is it?
Yeah, no, that's good.
You can see,
I can see.
That is.
Oh, it is like,
Mm-hmm. So it's not quite period accurate because it is 1830. You can see the dresses look very different as well at that time, but it's definitely historical, and it's closer to than a lot of other adaptations get. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
I think they take like minor liberties, but I think they're like relatively accurate to the period, or like inspired by the period, which is nice, and it looks right. I feel like they probably made all the colors brighter.
Right.
But it looks interesting, right? Because it's not all like white and cream, like the sort of Pride and Prejudice 1995 look. And I love the Pride and Prejudice 1995 look. Yeah. But they went very different with Emma. They went really bright colors, and it still looks historical. I think they did such a great job with the costumes.
Yeah.
You're right. To have everyone in white muslin dresses is a bit boring, isn't it? So it's nice to do something more exciting.
It was probably an interesting approach at the time.
Yeah. I really like it. Sorry, you go.
Something else I noticed with the hair in particular is that you can really tell from the women which of them do their own hair and which of them don't. So, for example, Harriet, and obviously Jane Fairfax's hair is actually discussed in the film as it is in the book as well. In the book, it's not really described. You just sort of have the characters making fun of Jane Fairfax's hair, but you don't know. I mean, later it turns out it's just a distraction tactic for Frank Churchill and whatever. But in the film, they really made the women who have maids do their hair look very different to the women who do their hair on their own. Like the contrast between Harriet Smith's hair and Emma's hair, I thought was really well done, because you can see that Harriet Smith's hair is a lot easier, a lot simpler to do. And I could probably do Harriet Smith's hairstyle, but I probably couldn't do Emma's on myself with my hair.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I know enough about hair that I would have ever been able to judge that. As someone who's always like mostly had short hair, like what I know about what to do with hair is just so limited. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Emma and Mrs. Elton's hair definitely look much more complicated to do.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about the small things they do to like draw the class distinctions in the film, because actually that is so important within Emma. As Hannah has said, like actually within Emma the book, like the subtle class distinctions between all of these people are so important that it's interesting that how they've brought that to screen, I suppose, which I also think they do with like one thing I really love about this Emma film is like how the servants are present in the big houses, especially in Highbury and Donwell. Like the servants are always in the room, like at all times, and actually like just highlighting the fact that would have been the historical reality for people of their class, and that's like would have, there would actually be lots of people in a room at all times. Like actually, I think that's done quite well. And it's quite like an interesting point that they've really drawn on in that adaptation.
I mean, you hear a little about the servants in the book, but they really do draw your attention to that in the film. And it's also interesting because I feel like because Highbury is such a small town, some of the class distinctions are a little more blurred than in some of the other books. But they really do draw your attention to the class distinctions in the movie a little more, I think.
Something that maybe you two can answer. I like I said, I'm not far enough into my own Emma reread, but something I noticed during the film is consistently Emma calling Harriet, and Harriet calling Emma Miss Woodhouse. Is that in the book as well? Maybe you know that, or someone in the comments.
I don't know. I feel like maybe.
Now that I think about it, I don't know.
Consistently in the film, Harriet says Miss Woodhouse, but Emma calls her Harriet. And I found that really interesting, but like I said, I didn't have the time to look that up as well.
Yeah, I'm like now I have my book in front of me. I'm like flipping through it, seeing
have a look browse.
I know. I'm just looking up on Gutenberg. I think Harriet definitely does call Emma Miss Woodhouse, but this might be near the beginning. I don't know if she calls her Emma later. But it's true, I suppose, that actually, the friendship between them is not a socially equal one. Like Emma is patronizing her in the old schools, the old-fashioned sense of the word patronizing. Like she's giving her patronage in some ways, which is quite interesting. I have to look out for that as I listen.
Yeah.
Emma almost picks Harriet out like a sort of pet, she's like, well, now I've lost Miss Taylor and no one's actually going to replace Miss Taylor, but look, there's a pretty girl in the village with a mysterious background. I'm going to take her on as a project. It's not from the beginning, it's not an equal friendship.
Yeah, and I think they do a good job in the adaptation of the first time they interact with each other. You see that Harriet is dressed much more plainly, and she looks almost like very nervous, like she's trying to impress Emma, and that carries along.
Yeah, I think there's a scene in the film where they're having tea together, and like Emma like picks up her cup, and Harriet like waits until Emma's had a sip before she has a sip from her teacup. Like you can see the sort of complexities of that power. That's a friendship with a lot of messy power dynamics within it.
Exactly.
But also seeing Harriet in the school a lot, in her school uniform with the other schoolgirls, I think also amplifies that contrast.
It does, yeah. But I think towards the end of the movie, it's a little different. That they seem much more on equal footing in some ways. Not the very end, but like before everyone gets married, where they're really opening up to each other about their feelings about the different characters and about Emma's mistakes in the past and misleading Harriet. And I can't remember, I haven't finished my reread of Emma this time. I can't remember how accurate that is to the book.
So I feel like I'm also relatively near the beginning of my reread of Emma, but I feel like I like that there are quite a lot of adaptations, this one and also the 2009 miniseries, which I really like, where they properly they lean into Harriet and Emma's friendship as a really important part of the book, and they make their friendship becoming better part of the ending, which I think is nice, because I feel like in the book the suggestion is like Emma moves on from Harriet, like she's kind of they live in separate worlds, and they maybe be polite to each other, but they're not going to be friends because they're not socially equal. Like that's basically the suggestion at the end of the book, which I think is realistic to the like class politics of the time period, but does feel quite disappointing in some ways. Like that's always a bit when I get to the end of Emma and I read that paragraph and I'm like, oh, that's a shame. Like, so I think it's quite nice when they sort of have a slightly different take on that in the film and kind of look at
yeah. I mean, I think a big part of the book and the ending, if I remember correctly, is, you know, Emma coming to terms with all of the misunderstandings and coming to terms with really her place in society and everyone else's place in society. And that sort of goes along with her not really being as intimate friends with Harriet, that they, you know, they're acquaintances and as is appropriate for their class distinctions.
Yeah, but I'm with Katie that I like that they modernize that aspect of the story, because Jane Austen's take is that this was an unhealthy friendship for Emma from the start.
Right.
And almost that Harriet is a bad influence in the same way that Frank Churchill is a bad influence. And that by the end, everyone has the proper place and that's better for everyone. I do like that they give Harriet a bit more character and don't just make her a victim, which is kind of what she is in the book. So all the adaptations I've seen kind of do that. And I like that aspect of modernizing the story.
I think one thing I always find with Jane Austen books is like they're always really open to interpretation. So actually, like different screen adaptations can be really, really interesting. As you know, that's also one of the reasons why I like retellings of Jane Austen, is because they just look really like take a Jane Austen book and have a particular interpretation of it, and it's really interesting to see different people's interpretation of it. Because I think, you know, we were talking earlier about like Emma as a character. I think there's a lot of different ways to read Emma, and some people really, really like her and some people don't. And so I think it's always interesting to see how the different adaptations like take her as a character, what direction they take her in.
Yeah, I mean, as a modern reader, I hate that they're not as close friends at the end, like, but it just in terms of Austen's world, that's how it kind of seems like it ends, to me at least. And at least last time I read it. I mean, this reread, who knows what I'll think.
Yeah, same. I'm really looking forward now after watching the film to really continue with the book and see how much of what I remember about Emma is actually what I remember about adaptations. And one thing I like about Emma is that it has a lot of really morally dubious or grey characters. Even the villains aren't as villainous as they are in some other Jane Austen books. You know, earlier we found ourselves having sympathy for Mrs. Elton. Mrs. Elton.
Yeah, I never had before, but for some reason, something about the watching the movie this time made me think about Mrs. Elton slightly differently. That, you know, she's young, she's not from the town, and everyone else is. I don't actually know if she realized that Mr. Elton proposed to Emma before her. And, you know, all of those things could potentially explain the way she acts, that she feels like she needs to kind of show that she, you know, she's the outsider, but she's in some way better than all the people from this small town, and, you know, trying to distinguish herself amongst them.
I think there's also like complicated like class politics in there too, because I think in the book, like, she's from new money. In fact, I feel like her family's money is from the slave trade, actually. I think that is the implication in the book, if I remember correctly. I think there's only like a really passing reference to that, but like she isn't from an old established family like Emma is, so she wants to be important in this society, so she has to force her way up, basically, which is quite interesting.
So I think some of those factors make her seem even more, you know, snarky and judgmental than she maybe necessarily is. Like, I don't know, in 5-10 years time, is she the same way?
Yeah, I guess you always see Jane Fairfax and Emma as kind of opposites, but in a way Mrs. Elton and Jane Fairfax are also opposites, because Jane Fairfax is from a genteel birth, but, you know, downtrodden and like poor, and might have to become a governess, which is obviously the horror. And but she is, from birth, she belongs more in this society than Mrs. Elton does, because of how class works. And it's not actually about the money, or it's not all about the money, but it's also about the status and your family.
I think there's also some interesting stuff with like one of the things that I find, which is a little bit in the film, but is more in the book, is that like that I find really dislikable about Mrs. Elton is like the way she treats Jane Fairfax and how like controlling she is. But actually, like that is a real parallel to Emma's friendship with Harriet and how Emma manipulates Harriet. So actually, it's quite interesting to see like. Yeah, it's quite interesting to see Mrs. Elton as actually being kind of similar to Emma in some ways, and maybe she is a bit exaggerated in some of Emma's faults, and so that's why Emma finds her really grating. And also,
and I think there's like passages. Yeah, I think there are passages where Emma is criticizing Mrs. Elton for basically the exact same things that Emma does herself, just like character flaws of herself that she notices in Mrs. Elton. So. Yeah, I think it's really interesting how basically every female character in Emma can be seen as a foil in some way, shape, or form to Emma herself. Yeah.
The characters are so good, and I think they do Mrs. Elton justice in the film. But I agree with James in the comments generally that Jane Fairfax just doesn't get enough screen time for us to really see any of her.
Yeah, so I don't really have much of a visual imagination, but I do have a visual memory. So if I read a book, I don't usually have images in my head, but if I read a book and I've watched a screen adaptation, I do occasionally, like remembering. And when I read Emma, the Emma and Mr. Knightley in my head and the Mr. Woodhouse in my head are from this 2020 film, but the Frank Churchill and Jane Fairfax in my head are from the 2009 adaptation. Because they're so much more fleshed out in adaptation. They give them a lot more time because it's a mini-series and they have the time, and it's a great mini-series. But I just think, I think the way they do Jane Fairfax in this film, in the 2020 film, isn't really my reading of Jane Fairfax. And Frank Churchill too. I think they make him more slimy. Like I don't dislike Frank Churchill that much. I think he's quite an interesting character and quite a complex character, but I think there is a more sympathetic interpretation of him, which I probably have, and I feel like this adaptation doesn't.
He doesn't really have charisma in this adaptation. He's very charismatic in the book and in the miniseries adaptation. He has no charisma, and Jane Fairfax also has no charisma because she's the great threat to Emma. Like she's the one that Emma compares herself to throughout the entire book. From Miss Bates's letters, she always compares herself to Emma, to Jane. And when Jane shows up, and Jane is beautiful, talented, everyone likes her. You don't get that in this film.
Yeah,
you just
not enough of it.
I
mean, you get a tiny bit in one scene, where Emma is playing piano, and then Jane Fairfax is playing the piano, and you can tell that Emma's jealous of her accomplishments, but. Other than that, you don't really see it. And it is pretty pervasive throughout the book in comparison. But I mean, it's a movie that doesn't have that much time. If it was a miniseries, they could do more with it. And then that's why they did in the miniseries.
Yeah. This is an interesting comment. I think there's quite an interesting parallel to be made between Emma and Jane Fairfax and Fanny and Mary Crawford. Yeah. And I love Mansell Park, and Fanny's one of my favorite heroines, so maybe that's why I like Emma slightly less. But I do think Jane Fairfax and Fanny Price definitely have quite a lot of things in common in terms of being a more sort of downtrodden character.
After reading Emma, Mansfield Park will be my the one I haven't read in the longest, and so I can't wait to think about this more when I reread it next.
I can totally imagine a retelling from Jane Fairfax's point of view, because she's such a good character, and if you imagine the story from her point of view, there must have been something going on with Mr. Dixon, right? And like you can have like that whole backstory, and then I can see a good author doing something with that story.
There's one by Joan Aitken from the 90s, I think.
Have you read it?
Which I read a few years ago, which I liked.
You liked it?
Yeah, I did like it. I wasn't like, yes, I absolutely, it wasn't like a new favourite retelling. There's definitely a lot of other retellings, but they're mostly a Pride and Prejudice. But there's definitely retellings I've enjoyed more. I thought she did interesting things with Jane Fairfax and with her relationships. And it was quite like Buildings Romani, like we had quite a lot of her childhood and stuff as well. And almost like sort of like a Jane Eyre kind of the sort of early stage of Jane Eyre, because she's in this house and she's a companion, but she's not like one of the family. And I guess actually similar Mansfield Park vibes as well, I guess there. But I thought it was good. Yeah, it would be interesting to. I kind of forgotten bits of it, but it was worth a read, I would say.
Yeah, because I had heard about it, but I haven't read it. I think I was considering it this time, and I looked it up on Goodreads, and it didn't have the best ratings, and I was like, but ratings don't mean that much, so maybe I will read it.
Yeah, I'd say I liked it, but I didn't love it, I guess.
Yeah.
What else do we have to say about? Wait, I'm going to look at the comments as well. What else do we have to say about the film? The soundtrack is great, as several people have said.
Yes.
That is definitely like one of my favorite things about the film. Like the look and the sound of it is just so lovely.
Katie, did you end up rewatching the nosebleed scene?
Oh yeah,
I did. I went back and watched it again. You know what? Actually, because I remembered that scene quite vividly, being like, what a weird choice to give her a nosebleed in the end of the proposal scene. And then when I was rewatching it this time, I was like, actually, I quite like it. It's quite a weird call, but I feel like Emma's panic of like, oh no, actually, like, I can't have a happy ending because I've got to fix the mess I made. I've got to help my friend is actually really nice in some ways. And there's quite like a nice sort of like panic, but also they sort of know that she's stressed. They both understand that she's stressed because she does love him. I think it's quite nice. So I actually liked it more on this scene.
It's weird, but it is a way of like externalizing the messiness and chaoticness of her, the mess she's made and the fact that she needs to like set it right before she can pursue this.
Yeah. Hannah asked in the comments, or she says that she identifies with Jane Fairfax more than any other character. Who do any of us feel the same? I don't really feel Jane Fairfax. I feel Jane Fairfax is too much of a mystery. She's too much of a closed book. I
definitely identify with her more than I do with Emma, though. And I think there's a few bits like, on the one hand, we don't see that much of Jane Fairfax in some ways in the book. We definitely don't in this film, but in the book, like, there are some moments, like there is the bit at the strawberry picking party where she's like, I'm just so tired. And actually, when you understand it later at the end, and you understand that she is so like exhausted of this pretend, and also like so stressed about her future. Like, actually, I do think that is really, like there is a really poignant, like quite emotional, like shadow story that goes under Emma that is Jane Fairfax's story. And I like her a lot. And maybe, I suppose, like we were talking about the sort of Fanny Price, Mary Crawford comparison earlier, I definitely identify much more with Fanny Price than Mary Crawford. And I think there's lots of points in Emma where I just don't understand Emma. I think she's a really well-drawn character, but I think I find her quite frustrating in many ways. Whereas like Jane Fairfax, I feel like probably I slightly understand more, even though there's lots we don't know about her.
Yeah. I mean, I think on a first read, well, first of all, in this movie, I did not identify with Jane Fairfax. I don't think she was developed enough. But in general, I think on my first read, I really loved Emma. I thought that, she exudes this confidence that I only wish I could have, to her detriment, of course. She has it in excess. And that perhaps I did identify with Jane Fairfax a little more, kind of feeling like being in the background a little bit. Reading it again, so far, I don't really identify with any of the characters personally. I mean, but yeah, it was always my reading, from in the past when I was younger, that I loved Emma for that reason.
I've always really liked Mrs. Weston. I don't know if I identify with her, but she's always been like, I'm like, yeah, she's right. She indulges Emma. Obviously, that's like the big theme is that she's sort of like the good angel, like on her shoulder, but she doesn't really push it with Emma. But I always like, and they actually included that in the film as well, the relationship that Mr. Knightley has with her. The way that they often talk about Emma and they argue about Emma and whatever. I really like that relationship.
Well, I also think Mrs. Weston is quite interesting because, like, obviously, like in Persuasion, Anne Elliot's like 27, and they're all like, "Oh my goodness, she's so old, she's never gonna get married." But like Mrs. Weston must be like in her mid-30s, I think, if not slightly older, because
she was the governess.
she's been Emma's governess for like 18 years, I think. So I think I tried to work it out, and I was like, she can't be younger than like 34, and she like probably actually, if you think about, I don't know, I think you could write a really interesting prequel to Emma about Mrs. Weston's life, because she presumably never thought she would get married and thought she would be a governess. But also, Emma's 21 and she was still living with them. If Emma got married, she would have, what would she do? She'd have nowhere to go. Before she
might be the governess for her children then.
Yeah, if Emma had got married before her, she would have been out of a home. So like, I think there's quite a lot of.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Like, I think, you know.
She's a really interesting character that hasn't really been developed as far as I know in any adaptation, not adaptation, but like
retelling.
I
have a fun fact about Mrs. Weston in the book, and I think this might be in all of Jane Austen's books. I think she is the only married woman who plays the piano. So
that's fun.
That is fun.
Yeah.
Because married women did not continue to play music after they got married, but Mrs. Weston does play at various parties for the young people to dance.
Well, that's fun. I like that. I like Mr. Weston as well. Like, he seems really nice, and they seem like they're quite happy. And you don't have that many happily married couples in Jane Austen that are already married. And obviously they haven't been married that long, but like I think they have a nice relationship, and I think it's quite nice. Yeah. That probably for Emma, who's a bit like on the fence about marriage herself, like it's probably quite nice that she has is a happily married couple nearby to like show that that's possible. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I really like.
Are you sure you fit on this table?
Your cat just really wants to be in the live show.
Yes.
Yeah.
She loves the attention.
Aww.
She's so sweet.
Mr. Weston also is a really kind of sympathetic character in the book, because there's all this thing about how poor Frank Churchill was torn away from him, and how he, the implication is that he's basically not allowed to see his son, which isn't quite true, because in the book I think they mention that he does see him regularly, but you always get this feeling of, he had this family and then it was taken away from him, and now he's getting this new start with Mrs. Weston.
I
think it's quite I feel like they're both getting second chances. How old is Mr. Weston supposed to be? I can't remember.
I think he's meant to be between 40 and 50, I think Harriet says at some point. So I think in this adaptation he probably looks a little bit older than he's meant to be. I think he's meant to be slightly younger, but yeah, I think he's in his 40s.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, I guess. And I guess Frank is in his early 20s, so yeah, Mr. Weston's probably then like 20, 25 years older than him, late 40s maybe. Yeah. Some people were talking in the comments about Knightley seeming younger in this adaptation. Yeah, well, I think I did check at the time. I think the actors are about the right ages. Like, I think Anya Taylor-Joy was in her early 20s, and I think the guy who plays Mr. Knightley, whose name I've forgotten, Johnny something Flynn. Is that a different person? Johnny Flynn.
Someone did mention his name earlier. Yeah.
Someone wisely, kindly put it in the comment for me. Thank you, Tim. Johnny Flynn. I think he was in his like mid to late 30s. So I think they are the correct ages. And actually, like, I think obviously there is an age gap between them, but like, yeah, it doesn't seem that big in the film, which is nice and makes sense. And also for the relationship between them, like, even though he is older than her, and even though they argue with each other, I think because like Emma always argues back with him, therefore it doesn't feel like there is a power dynamic, like a power. Yeah, it doesn't feel like the power dynamic.
I mean, there is obviously power dynamic, but as much as there is between any woman and any man at that time.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel like,
like he's taking advantage. I think they definitely tried to demature him in his behavior in the film, because I think the danger with Mr. Knightley is always to not have him be this like lecturing sort of avuncular figure who's just always sort of wagging his finger at Emma. And that's why I think they overplayed his jealousy when it comes to Frank Churchill as well. Like they made it like they made him comically jealous of Frank Churchill, and I think all of that adds to this trying to make him look a bit less mature than he might be in the book.
I think he is that jealous in the book. I think the difference was in the movie. I thought they didn't play up Frank Churchill's like flirtiness
Yeah,
and like playfulness
Yeah,
enough.
so therefore the jealousy feels less reasonable.
Yeah, so it just feels
Yeah,
less reasonable. Exactly.
I guess also like in the book I don't think see anything from Mr. Knightley's perspective. So you see how Emma views the world and, you know, other comments on other characters, but you don't really, you know, like obviously there are some Jane Austen books where you do see more from the like hero's perspective, but you don't much in Emma, I don't think. So actually you don't really know how Mr. Knightley's feeling until quite late on, whereas in a film where you're seeing things from the outside, not viewed through Emma's vision, like actually you therefore get to see it more, which I like. I really like how they do Mr. Knightley in this film, and I love Mr. Knightley in the 2009 one too. John Lee Miller's really good in that one as well, but I think in this film I do think they do the sort of like chemistry between Emma and Mr. Knightley really well, which I like.
Yeah, I mean the cast is really good throughout.
Oh yeah.
Right. I think the cast is really well. Although I don't care, and I love Ben Nye, but I don't care for this Mr. Woodhouse because I always in the book, and this is an interpretation thing, right? I always see him as slightly sinister.
Oh.
And
Really?
do you not?
No, I don't.
Tell us more. This is
I see him
fascinating.
as being quite manipulative and a bit controlling.
Huh.
And okay, I guess
No, it's interesting. I want to hear more.
please, someone in the comments back me up here. No, I see his anxiety and his hypochondria really as a way of almost like not in an evil way, more in a sort of incidental way, controlling Emma and everyone around him.
I feel like he's just
And
very
I actually think that that's
yeah.
you can see that in the 2009 miniseries. I think they played up that how everyone just sort of accommodates him to a really unreasonable degree in the 2009 film, and there he's just Bill Nye. You just want to kind of hug him, you know, like this is Bill Nye.
I feel like I see what you mean a little bit. I don't view it as manipulative. I view it as he is completely preoccupied and oblivious to everything around him, and in that way almost selfish. And that other people, are extra accommodating to him. And I do think there is an aspect of Emma not wanting to get married that is that she doesn't want to abandon her father. And you know how much of that is, you know, from him and on purpose from him. It's, you know, that's up to interpretation. I always got the sense that it was just Emma's, you know, care for him and his
I quite like their relationship in the book. Like I definitely always viewed him as more like bumbling and more like he is anxious and he doesn't really understand other people, but he's not like ever trying to disrupt other people. I think there's in the 2020 film there's a little bit where they have, when it's snowing, Mr. Woodhouse says something like "Your mother died on a snowy night," and it's obviously a joke.
Yes.
But I think actually we don't know very much about how Emma's mother died, and in my head his health anxiety is probably like to do with his wife's death, and maybe that's why he's like terrified of getting ill all the time, because he's actually like was really upset when his wife died, and maybe that's why he's like terrified of everyone's health. That's what I have in my head as why he panicked.
I think that's the reasonable interpretation. And I've just finished reading the YA retelling, Katie, that you mentioned, I think in one of your videos, Emmett by Elsie Rosen.
I haven't read it yet.
I don't want to spoil it.
I haven't read it.
I'm not going to spoil that, but that is definitely an interpretation that the author uses as well, to have the main character's mother's death to be big reason why the father's so anxious.
Well, I think it's quite interesting in lots of Jane Austen, because death and grief aren't really looked at very much, but I do think there's lots of stuff to be read into it. Like I often think in Sense and Sensibility, like actually their father just died, and their grief isn't ever really talked about, but actually if you look at the way like Marianne behaves and how like over the top she is, viewing that as like a reaction to having lost someone quite important, kind of
true. You always feel like they grieve the house and they grieve the life.
And maybe that is all a way of grieving their father, like, but it's not really present. And obviously Jane Austen's father was dead by the time she was rewriting to publish Sense and Sensibility, so maybe that was just a place she didn't want to go. I think the Watsons she stopped writing because that's one of her unfinished novels. She wasn't writing it when she died. She started writing it earlier on in life, and her plan had been to have the father died, and then when her father was dying, she just didn't want to write it anymore. I believe
never went back to it.
Yeah, I believe that's the theory, at least.
It's a good theory.
Yeah, there's you're getting some support in the comments.
Yeah.
Claudia.
No, just because we don't interpret it that way doesn't mean
it's, really
it's not there to read. Yeah.
Just by your reaction, I was like, am I literally the only?
No. I wanted to hear more. I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah.
Because I do see how his personality and everything affects everyone else. I just never thought of it as intentional.
Yeah, and
I always saw like not entirely. He's not like a mastermind, and I think in the book it's pretty clear, and I think it's even in Emma's description. It says that she basically did not get her brains from her father. That's kind of spelled out in the book. Is that he's not the most, he's not the smartest. But I did always see his behavior as like I said, slightly sinister. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting. One of the things I really like about Jane Austen's books, like Nancy says, Mr. Woodhouse is a very layered character, and I feel like all of the characters are really layered, like even the minor ones. Like every time I read, I change a Jane Austen book, I slightly change my interpretation. I think I used to really like Mr. Bennet in Pride and Prejudice, and now I really don't like Mr. Bennet, and my has definitely shifted quite a lot over time, gone from being like, oh, he's really funny, to being like, is he actually quite horrible to his wife? And like I think there's so many different ways of interpreting all the characters and all of their relationships, which that's one of the things I like so much about her books. There's always different ways to read it.
And I think that's why Emma is so great to adapt, and why it's been adapted so many times, is because everyone has different interpretations of the characters, and sometimes there's just so much to do with them.
I would say that Emma is not my favorite Jane Austen novel. Like it would probably be in like third or fourth place, but my favorite but my favorite adaptations of Jane Austen books, like that, there are two Emma ones, the 2021, the 2009 one, which would rank very, very highly, like in terms of my all favorite. Like they'd be in the top 5, probably in the top 3, along with the 2009 2008 Sense and Sensibility one, would be my all-time favorite Austen adaptation. So it's interesting that although it's not my absolute favorite Austen book, I do love the adaptations of it, and I think it's one that works really, really well on screen.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. Interesting. Which is weird, because if you think about Emma in the book, it's quite small setting. We don't really see a lot of places. We don't go to London like we do in a lot of other Jane Austen books. We don't go to these big balls. We don't have big like traveling scenes. And yet in this contained setting, it works really well visually.
Maybe that makes it easier to adapt in a way, because it's easier to cut things and move things around. It's slightly easier to make it one.
Good point.
Like in this adaptation, I think in the book Frank visits Highbury twice, and they've like combined his visits or something, which makes complete sense. But obviously there are lots of Jane Austen novels where you can't move things around or squish things together because the characters move around, whereas Emma, you can do that a bit more.
I always think Sense and Sensibility is such a hard to adapt book, and we have got 2 good adaptations of it, but always when I read it, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of backstory first of all, and there's a lot of scene changes and stuff. Still new Mansfield Park adaptation. I say that as someone who doesn't like the book, but I think we're due a really good Mansfield Park.
I'd like a good one, because there's never been a good one, to be honest.
You like the web series.
I like the web series from Mansfield Would Love, which is a modern one, but there's I do love it. I think that's really good, and I think it interprets all the characters really well. But I think I
watched that when it was coming out, but I wasn't that happy with it. But it was good. It was okay, but I want a good historical one. I want maybe the same crew that made Emma to do Mansfield Park.
Yes.
So they need to actually be true to Fanny as a character, because there's a film of Mansfield Park from the 90s, which if you watch without having read the book, is quite fun, but that is not Fanny Price. That is Elizabeth Bennet.
Elizabeth Bennet as Fanny.
Turn everyone into Elizabeth Bennet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're like that study, that Persuasion adaptation, where they were like, "Oh, we're going to take Anne Elliot and we're going to make her someone else." And I just can we not give the introverts a nice Jane Austen love story? No, makes me very cross. But anyway, Anyway, I also put this comment on the screen because I like the idea that Mr. Woodhouse and Mrs. Bennet would be friends. They just sit in the corner complaining about the draft.
They would drive each other insane, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that idea. Monica's asked, what did we think of Isabel and John as a couple in this adaptation versus the book? I feel like they, for the adaptation, just like made both of them really extreme, like pushed them to complete caricature for comic purpose, which does work, but I feel like they are more complicated and less extreme in the book.
Yeah. And I mean, I think part of that is they don't get a ton of screen time because there's limited screen time. And so it's a good way of using them to enhance the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fine. They are so plot irrelevant that turning them into caricatures doesn't really matter, I think.
Yeah, to be honest, it wouldn't have been a terrible choice to not have them in the adaptation. Yeah. Like, you could have. Yeah. I suppose it's important for the dynamic between Emma and Mr. Knightley that their siblings are married to each other, but like, you don't necessarily otherwise need them in the plot. Yeah. I think in the book, I like the fact that it's John Knightley that like says to Emma, by the way, Mr. Elton probably in love with you. Like, I'm pretty sure that's John Knightley, and I think that's quite kind of fun that he like is kind of looking out for her in a different way, but also is going to be more direct about it than Mr. Knightley, his brother, would be. Which I always think is quite interesting.
Because John does not have patience for anything or anyone.
No,
so he's like, straight to the point.
Yeah.
I actually wondered, just one more thing on that. I was wondering about John Knightley and if he's always that cranky or if he's just that cranky because he's visiting, his wife's family, like that he has to deal with Mr. Woodhouse and everything.
Yeah, and Emma's father would probably wind you up. And also because I think they say that like he hasn't been to Donwell Abbey for ages because Mr. Woodhouse is like so stressed that they always have to go, although they're going to Highbury and they've like missed their time at Donwell Abbey. So maybe he's just quite cross that he didn't get to go hang out with his brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's the younger brother, right? Like he has got a profession of some sort. Is he a barrister or something?
He's a lawyer. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's the younger brother. Yeah. So he's got to go make his way in the world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is a good point from Vero that like Emma's father maybe enables her she can therefore like look after him, but also she kind of likes that. I think that's quite an interesting point.
She wants to feel needed, I guess, which is probably why she is attracted to Harriet as well.
Yeah. The project because which I think is you go.
Oh no, go ahead.
I should just say I feel like one thing I always find quite interesting with Emma and her like matchmaking and taking on Harriet as a project, and all the like, Mr. Knightley teases her for like all her TBRs, all the lists of books that she makes and doesn't finish. And I think like Emma is clearly bored, like even though she says she's got like everything she wants in life and she's wealthy, etc., and she's got society, but like I think you can kind of tell that she is bored, and like that's one of the reasons why she has all these projects and like tries to take people under her wing, because actually she's quite intelligent at a point in time where women don't get much opportunity to use their intelligence. And she's very wealthy and like comfortably situated, so she doesn't have a reason to kind of do anything, but therefore she probably is a bit bored. Someone else had a comment about like her traveling. Yeah, I think there's a bit where she says she hasn't been to. She definitely says she's never been to the seaside. I can't remember what else.
Definitely said that. Yeah.
But the impression is that she very rarely gets to leave home because of her father's health. Yeah. I guess he's obviously quite elderly.
Highbury, it says in the book, is 15 miles from London, which even in a carriage isn't the world. But it almost feels like Highbury's a lot more remote than it actually is.
Yeah.
I don't think Mr. Woodhouse is that elderly. I think he's portrayed. It's just my reread this time. I remember thinking, "Oh, that's interesting. I thought he was older." They said that like he acts older than he is because of his
older. Yeah. I noticed that as well in this reread. He makes the impression of an older man, basically. Yeah.
But I don't know how old he is.
Yeah. What does it say? I found the quote. The evil of the actual disparity in their ages, and Mr. Woodhouse had not married early, was much increased by his constitution and habits. He was a much older man in ways than in years. So I think he isn't like if he married young, married late, then but I think probably he is like in his 60s acting like he's in his 80s.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the impression I got.
Yeah.
One thing that they didn't add to the film, which, you know, fair enough because of the time, but we were talking about how Emma's really bored, and in the book she has all these projects. There's one scene where she and Harriet basically make a really long TBR, and then Mr. Knightley goes, "You're never gonna read these." It's so relatable. And they do all these, they have this like puzzle book, and they do all these little puzzles and quizzes
riddles,
and riddles and stuff. And she draws, obviously, and so you really get the feeling she's trying to fill her days with just something to stimulate her mind, and there just isn't much there.
Yeah, there's something about all her drawings are like half finished because she never finishes them because she like gets bored of them. Actually, she doesn't have like a passion. Like obviously Jane Fairfax has like a passion for music and is really, really talented. The impression we get, whereas Emma like isn't that talented. She can play, she can draw, she can do lots of things, but there's nothing she really like loves except like talking to people, I guess. But very interesting.
I love this comment.
Yeah, I like this idea that that Mr. Woodhouse therefore relies on her because he would have relied on his wife to like be the sensible, practical one, maybe.
Not that Emma's exactly sensible and practical.
No,
I get what you're saying.
I think, but maybe he treats her more like she is that than she actually is. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, I do like the relationship between the two of them. Like, and I think the 2020 film does it in a very nice way that makes it, like, I think there's that nice moment at the end where like she's really upset and he just comes and sits down next to her because he doesn't actually know what to say, but he's just going to sit there. And they're sitting in a window, which I didn't notice until this time, and he's so worried about drafts, but he sits in the window with her, and I was like, oh, that's quite nice. Yeah. I think that's quite sweet. Yeah, we haven't talked that much about the comedy, but I do think like it is a great Jane Austen adaptation for like highlighting how funny Emma is. And I think Miranda's a really good Miranda Hart's a really good Miss Bates for being like so funny, but also you do feel bad for her because you know that scene where they're in the like in the milliners. I think they're in the milliners, and she's like, "Oh, where have I put the letter?" and keeps sitting down and standing up and stuff.
Where she goes, talks about the letter and then just gets distracted by those.
I just hit the
some random things. Like,
No, it's really great.
Yeah.
She's very good. Although I have to say I do prefer Miss Bates from the miniseries. I can't remember her name now.
Is it Tamsin Greig?
Is it? I think I do. I think
Tamsin,
I prefer
Tamsin Greig. Tamsin Greig, is it?
Yeah,
Tamsin Greig, I think.
I think so.
Right, she's so good. I mean, like actually the Box Hill scene where Emma's so horrible to her, like I cry in the miniseries. I'm just like.
I have to rewatch it.
Yeah, I really need to rewatch it.
I really do.
It's been such a long time since I've watched that one because it's longer. Like I love so many of the miniseries, but it's harder to find the time for a miniseries, whereas a film is 2 hours actually. But I'm looking forward to rewatching that. Maybe I'll try and rewatch that later in July if I have time.
I think I might do a rewatch after I finish the book. I think that's my plan.
Yeah. Such a good book.
Okay, some people talking about the comedy. I think the comedy is something that's just often ignored in Jane Austen adaptations and Jane Austen retellings. People focus on the romance and maybe people focus on the familiar relationships, but I do feel like the comedy is often just maybe it's a humor that doesn't translate that well to film. I don't know, but I like that Emma 2020 tried to be funny. Sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't.
Yeah, because Jane Austen is hilarious. Like I laugh so much when I read a Jane Austen novel. Like I'm much more likely to be laughing than I am crying. Like they're really funny, and that for me is what I love them more than like the romance. So
and I think Emma and Pride and Prejudice are like the two funniest ones. So for them to be able to try and translate that into film is nice.
Because sometimes I think they focus too much on like the sweeping romance and forget to make it funny. And they do similar thing with Dickens, not so much the romance, but like so many Dickens adaptations are like all grit and grimness, and I'm like, where is the humor? Dickens is like half absurd hilarity. What have you done with it? Which is why I really like the 2020 David Copperfield film, which is much more like the feel of Dickens in its humor, and it's quite nice to yeah, like I really like it when they keep the humor, because a lot of 19th century books are really, really funny, and I think sometimes we think, oh, because they're old, they're probably serious, and that's just not true at all. Like Jane Austen is fun.
Yeah, that's true. No, all Jane Austen books are funny, even Mansfield Park.
Yeah.
And I think, adaptations should focus more on that. I think Emma 2020 did well in that regard, even though, the weird nosebleed or whatever, maybe
I'm
not the
coming
best
around to it. Yeah. Yeah, the comedy is good. Yeah, it's very fun.
And I mean, Miss Bates is one of the funniest characters in all of Austen, and Mrs. Elton. There's so many good comic relief characters in this book.
I also love that Miss Bates gets so much time in Emma. Like I always remember, I often listen to audiobooks of Jane Austen, but the last time I read Emma physically, and there's several bits where Miss Bates just has like 5 pages in a row of just her dialogue, and
Yes.
that's I just love that she gets so much page time, because I think she's excellent and she's great, and it's almost a way of being like, Emma's not paying attention to Miss Bates, but I'm going to make you pay attention to Miss Bates, which I just kind of think is fun. Yeah. Yeah. Someone asked, favorite Austen based on ensemble cast. So do you mean like favorite minor character stuff? I'm gonna guess. I don't know. I'm trying to think, because there's a lot of great side characters and minor characters in a lot of great Austen novels. I love the supporting cast in Sense Sensibility. Like, love Mrs. Jennings and the Palmers and like all of those people. I do love the supporting cast in Emma. Like, Miss Bates and.
I think the reason I like Emma so much is because the ensemble cast, the minor characters, feel more major and feel more fleshed out.
Yeah.
So,
my favorite minor character in all of Austen is John Thorpe. I can't even.
I feel like he is hilarious and ridiculous, but I also feel like Northanger Abbey, because it's so much shorter, and Persuasion as well. Like those are the 2 that are shorter, and therefore you get a bit less like time with the side characters.
Yeah,
which is maybe why they're 2 of my like they're quite low down my ranking of Austen, I would say, because I love the minor characters more often.
Yeah, she's so good, but like with John Thorpe, I really feel like he's probably based on a real person who really annoyed her. Like he is so real in the way he talks that I'm like, this person could be like around today and just talk exactly the same way.
Yeah, whenever he goes on about his carriages, you could just imagine someone talking about their sports cars like that. It was very funny.
Yep.
Yeah. Lots of good minor characters.
Yeah.
Isabella Thorpe, she is very interesting. I noticed as I was watching people's Jane Austen July TBRs, and I'm annoyed that I can't remember who, but someone had in the TBR a few retellings that seemed to be from the Mean Girls point of view. There was one from Caroline Bingley's point of view. I think there was something about Isabella Thorpe as well. I'm wondering if that's maybe the next sort of trend, the next reinterpretation of Austen, where we focus more on those Mean Girl characters, maybe Mrs. Elton as well, and maybe we've done the parents, we switched around on Mr. Bennet and on Mrs. Bennet, and I think maybe it's time for the Mean Girls to get a closer look and a new interpretation.
I'd be quite interested to have a Caroline Bingley retelling, because I feel like there are moments in Pride and Prejudice where I'm like, actually I feel really sorry for you. I don't know. So that would be kind of fascinating.
Yeah, there is one. I'm going to find it, because like I said, someone had it on the TBR video I watched. There was actually a retelling from Caroline Bingley's point of view, although I think it might have been one that then goes off in a completely different direction. I can't remember if it was like a detective story or something like that, but it had her as the main character, and I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I would definitely read a Jane Austen Mean Girls mashup. Like how in The Murder of Mr. Wickham by Claudia Gray, there's like all the Jane Austen heroines come together. I would definitely read all the Jane Austen Mean Girls come together. And they're a bit hard, but I would read that.
Yeah. I mean, Miss Crawford would be the undefeated leader of that group.
Yeah. Emma could join.
Emma is part Mean Girl. Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I
think that's why I like Clueless so much, because it really leans into that, with high school and everything.
Yeah, I think Vera's made a good point here that like I think Mr. Collins is always funny, but like it's true that actually it's quite nice in like in this Emma film where Miss Bates is both a comic character but also like a really important emotional character who you do feel for and who is like very like vital to Emma's like character arc. Is her coming to understand that Miss Bates is not just a joke, which is
And it's not just one character that's funny. They try to make a lot of characters funny.
Right. Yeah. On the flip side, because you have a lot of comic scenes with Mr. Knightley, for example, and we always think of him as a serious character or whatever, but he gets to be part of the comedy in this film as well, which I like.
Yeah. And he kind of is in the book too. I mean, he's at the very least a little witty with the way he says things.
Yeah. Him and Emma's conversations definitely like have that comedy to them sometimes.
There's a few scenes in the book where he and Emma are having this like witty conversation. It just goes completely over Mr. Woodhouse's head, and Mr. Woodhouse is like, what are you talking about? But you know, he doesn't follow them because they're too quick-witted and too clever for him. And I like that we got to see a bit of that in the film.
Do we have anything else to say? We have been here an hour. Do we have any final thoughts on the Emma 2020 film? I know I was like, oh, it's been an hour. Yeah. So much to say.
No,
I don't think so. I really like it. Yeah, it's definitely up there for me as one of my favorite adaptations. Okay, there we go. That's a good thing to end on. What is your favorite screen adaptation of a Jane Austen book?
I'm going to be so boring. I like the 1995 ones. Pride and Prejudice and Sense and Sensibility 1995.
Yeah.
They're my favorites.
Probably Pride and Prejudice 1995, and then weirdly Clueless as well, even though it's not one of those, historical ones. I just think it captures all the characters so well. And I haven't watched it in many years, and I'm going to rewatch it this year, so we'll see if I still feel that way.
My internet went briefly down, so I missed what film you said, Marissa.
Oh, I said 1985, Pride and Prejudice, but I also said Clueless, but then tempered it with I do need to rewatch Clueless. I haven't watched it in so many years and may no longer feel that way. I don't know.
And what about you?
I think the 2000, I can never remember if it's 2008 or 2009, Sense Sensibility, and the Emma miniseries, which I just absolutely love, and the Emma miniseries from 2009. I think those two are probably my favorite adaptations. I do also have a real soft spot for this 2020 Emma film and also for the Love and Friendship film. Partly I just think because I love Lady Susan so much and it like gets so forgotten, and so it's really fun that there is a film of it, even if it's got
I love the Love and Friendship one. Yeah. I forgot that I was gonna that counts.
Very stylized, and they do some very clever things with it. And it's also much more
visually it's quite close to the Emma 2020 in the approach and the visual approach of it. To have it look really historical but be filmed in a quite modern way. I think it's
and I love how they incorporate the letters into it too, with it on the screen. It's so good. Yeah, I forgot about that one as part of this.
Do you have a favorite, Claudia? Did I also miss that when my internet briefly went down?
Possibly. Yeah, but mine's really boring. I like the 1995 Sense and Sensibility, and I like the 1995 Pride and Prejudice. So just very mainstream.
They're loved for a reason.
That comment is cracking me up right now.
Yeah, Lady Susan would out-manipulate them all, wouldn't she? She would win.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Win.
How could we forget
her interact with other people?
Yeah, the ultimate mean girl. Yeah.
Absolutely.
She would take them all down.
Yeah.
Great. Cool. I feel like that's a good moment to end on. So go and read Lady Susan if you haven't. It's a very excellent history of Ella by Jane Austen that is forgotten, but great. I think that's all. Thanks for coming, people, and happy Jane Austen July and so on. And I will end the live stream. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.